decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show with Dave Minuk, with His Royal Majesty King Ezra II. I'm your host, Drew Mindell, here for the next couple of hours, talk about everything to do with the Winnipeg Jets, and it certainly was a very newsworthy Friday in Winnipeg Jets land. Gentlemen, good to see you both. His Royal Highness.
Nice to see you as well, Drew.
It's especially good to be in your presence. Dave M., happy belated birthday to you. You're on mute. For your birthday, I was hoping you would learn how to unmute your mic properly, but
the question is, though, Drew, did you remember Dave's birthday? Did you wish him a happy birthday via text or phone call?
Yeah, I did much later in the day. I'm the worst with birthdays. I have no idea. I can barely remember my kids' birthdays. It's Aaron's on Monday. Happy birthday, Aaron. But I'm the worst with birthdays. I'm awful about it. Usually I will text somebody happy birthday if I see like somebody made them a cake on Instagram, and that's my cue as a reminder that it was their birthday. I have no clue about birthdays at all.
That's why Facebook is great. I don't think people use Facebook as much as they used to. No, but Facebook for birthdays. I'm not saying we're not going to get into, Mark Zuckerberg's, privacy policy here, Drew, but I'm just saying for birthdays, it's good for reminding you when they are. But I agree, especially now that, there's all these little kids in our lives and everything like that. You really just have to remember your own family's birthday. That's what really matters. And Dave M is family. So Dave M, you got a good birthday. I know you got to spend some good time with family. So we're celebrating Dave M's birthday a couple days late here.
The problem is the people who there's still those people who definitely know when everyone's birthdays are, and they so you get a text from them and happy birthday the minute the clock rolls over to midnight or something on your birthday, and you're and then you feel guilty because you have no clue when that person's birthday is. You're I know it's in a fall month. It's do I just have to text you every day in October and November until I hit it on the right one? It's very, very disturbing for me. I'd rather no birthdays. Nobody acknowledge my birthday. That way I won't feel the least bit guilty about not acknowledging your birthday.
You're such a curmudgeon, Drew. And the thing is, when you're as old as you are, I mean, really, you don't want to tell people your birthday, right? When you become an octogenarian, you really don't want people to remember your birthday because you're going to be turning 81 pretty soon, right? So, but yeah, it is hard to remember everyone's birthday, but not Dave M's.
All right, boys. Well, I appreciate the birthday love. It's been great. Like I said, it was nice for me. I had my grandparents around, which is awesome. And
that's amazing. You still have grandparents around. That's just fantastic.
Yeah. Both my Baba is turning 95 next week, so we'll be celebrating her 95th birthday next Friday. So you guys want to share some birthday love for my Baba, Shirley? You're more than welcome.
Baba Shirley's birthday we'll remember. That's an important birthday. We'll remember Baba Shirley.
Okay, good.
Let's get into the news of the week, gentlemen, because it was shaping up. I'll admit it. As the clock hit 9 a.m. yesterday, and you begin to move into show mode. At least my brain does. Okay, there's the Young Stars tournament, and we'll touch on that. And training camp is next week. But it's sort of been an uneventful week for the Winnipeg Jets. There's the Mark Chipman letter, which we'll talk about in the course of the show. But it wasn't anything that was sort of A1 headline news. Well, that certainly changed yesterday, right around, about 10:30 or so in the morning, when the email came out saying that the Winnipeg Jets were making a change in their leadership, or whatever, cockamamie language the team used.
Restructuring.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have to repeat the cockamamie language.
No, but I think it's important because I think this season is all going to be about buzzwords. And I think, as I said in the morning papers today, restructuring will now be one of the, I don't think we're going to be talking about it for a long time this season, but I think it's definitely going to be something that's notable.
And it certainly was notable. At this point, we'd heard all the talk in the offseason about Wheeler and his future and all the changes for the Jets. And well, frankly, none of that happened. So as I sat there yesterday, September 16th, training camp a week away, I really didn't see this coming. This sort of came out of left field to me. I thought the Jets were fully going to run it back despite having the horrible results that they did last year. Instead, you get this announcement that Wheeler is no longer going to be the captain. The Jets won't have a captain for this coming season. I guess the first question to you, Dave M, before we get His Royal Majesty in here, is what was your reaction to seeing the news?
Shock. As you said, Drew, there really wasn't a lot going on yesterday, and except for the jersey patch. I thought, okay, that's, maybe that'll be something that's notable that we're talking about. And then all of a sudden, shortly thereafter, boom, that jersey patch is not even a thought in the mind, because now you're focused on the press release that the Jets
worst
put out.
Jersey patch ever.
Well, believe me, I'm sure we'll get into that, but it's not really. It's not A plus material, like Drew said, for the start of the show.
It's not part of the A block in today's show.
No, but I mean, I think it's like you said, Drew. I think it's something that we all had thought about. We've talked about it. Like, how do you come back with Blake Wheeler, given the fact that both sides had talked about a potential move like this? Not of the captaincy being removed, but of him not being with the team anymore. And both sides, it was supposed to be amenable, which is fine. But at the same time, it means that you're not necessarily wanting to be here. And it's one thing if the team says it, but if you're also open to it, it makes it a little difficult to try and sell that narrative that, okay, well, I still want to be here. I still want to be the captain. I still want to be the leader, because I don't know. I don't think it shows that anymore. So, I mean, we were a little surprised, and it's late, right? I mean, I know that Rick Bowness has talked about it, and we'll get into the pressers in a bit. But yeah, my initial news was shock. I was shocked that the Jets actually made the move. I think it was the move that they had to make. But I think I was shocked that, and I've said this before, being captain is not really like anything of super significance. It's actually more of an annoyance, because you got to talk to people like us for a lot. But at the same time, I just think it's, I just think it was a symbolic move that they probably needed to make I think for Rick Bowness, he had to put his stamp on this team, and he's done that now.
Yeah. See, I don't think it's just symbolism, Dave. And I'm quite frankly shocked that so many people were shocked that this happened, right? Because we've been talking about this for how long, right? Not just Blake Wheeler as captain, but the Jets leadership group, right? Like, we know that, this Jets team has it's been a while that it's moved away from, Wheeler, Scheifele, Stastny, I would throw in there as one of the leaders, right? Even though he obviously went to Vegas there. But I mean, we know that, the true leaders on this team are guys like Josh Morrissey, Adam Lowry, Nick Ehlers, Kyle Connor, the kind of younger core of this team, right? So you want to get this done before camp starts, right, boys? Like, I'm not saying, Dave, that you don't agree with that, but I think, we knew that the C was not going to be stripped until the Jets had their head coach in place, right? And we know that, it took forever for them to get to Rick Bowness after Barry Trotz decided that he didn't want to coach, right? So, I mean, yeah, they could have announced this, a month ago, or something like that. So I think, people were surprised, it was a Friday, and we always joke that, the Jets always, release these types of, bonus bombshells, as Scotty Billeck, called it, just in time for us to come on air. But like, this was an obvious choice. And, I don't think that, this means that, Blake Wheeler is not going to play on the power play and he's going to be buried on the third line or anything like that. I mean, we have to wait and see, how he plays this year, whether, he ends up on the top power play or second line or anything like that. I think nobody's going to argue that, it's time for Nick Ehlers to get first power play time and Nick Ehlers to have increased role. I can't believe we're still talking about this, by the way, because we were talking about this 3 years ago back on TSN 1290. But this, to me, was an obvious choice. And Blake Wheeler admitted it himself that, having the C on his jersey was becoming a burden. So, I mean, I think, this is going to be good for Wheeler and the team. I just don't think it's as controversial as some people are making it out to be.
I wouldn't say that it's controversial. I think most people would say that it's overdue. That would be the word that I think is probably.
And that's why I'm not surprised, because it is, right. It's long overdue. It's right. I would say a year in the making.
Right. But the fact that it happened yesterday, that it happened so close to training camp, that it didn't happen, earlier in the off season is what I think the timing of it is the interesting part. Now, I guess you would say that, maybe Rick Bowness had, when he was hired, he had the opportunity to speak to the players and to take stock of the situation and to take stock of the team and to take stock of what he was hearing, and then decided to make this decision now. But, this should have happened I mean, maybe not should have happened. I'm surprised that it didn't happen earlier, and that when it didn't happen earlier, that it happened now. That's where I was surprised, that because this team, I mean, they're so stubborn, this organization, when it comes to making what I would describe are fairly apparent changes when they're necessary, that I just didn't see this coming. I didn't see this happening. Now, I guess that gives me some faith that Rick Bowness, is really going to be the one who's going to drive that dressing room. That he's going to be the one who's able to put his stamp on a dressing room. And it's, how many years ago has it been now since we heard Paul Maurice say ruffled feathers in the dressing room? It's been a lot of years, guys, and there's never really been any change to that. This is at least a sign that something is changing, that there's an acknowledgement, an honest acknowledgement that everything in that room wasn't hunky-dory. Now, does removing the captaincy make it hunky-dory? No, that would be a bridge too far. Time will tell, if this is a solution to all that ails the Winnipeg Jets. But I think it is an overdue and a necessary start to try and figure out what that problem is. And if it continues to be a problem, obviously, they've erred in trying to run it back with this team again, Dave.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I don't have a problem with Rick Bowness coming in and making some sort of reactionary move and plunking the C off of Wheeler and throwing fire. I mean, there's only so much he can do, right? There's only so much control that the coach has versus the GM. But I think that Rick Bowness was hired at the beginning of July, and I think that it's taken him some time to catch up and meet with all the players and have dialogues with them and kind of get an assessment as to what this team is all about. And yeah, it was left late. And I mean, I guess the curious fact from a Jet standpoint, from a PR standpoint, was if this was what you're planning on doing. And it doesn't sound like they had already come to this conclusion, really, because like I said, when Blake Wheeler spoke about it, it really sounds like it was a conversation they had in the last few days. Mm-hmm. But you would have thought from a PR perspective that doing this in the middle of August, when there's nothing really to talk about, there's really no accessibility, that it becomes a lot different of a conversation, right? I mean, maybe they could trot Rick Bowness out, but they wouldn't necessarily have to have like a whole gaggle of folks. I mean, yesterday was a big gathering of our media brethren at the Iceplex, and so it was a standing room only crowd. Although one guy was sitting, but the point is, it was a standing room only.
Was it a rocking chair?
It was not a rocking chair; it was a regular chair. But the point is that it did not fold. No, it was a hardback chair. But anyways,
Adirondack.
It was not an Adirondack. The point is that
did it have a chaise?
It did not have a chaise.
Was there a cushion on the chair?
There was no cushion. Hey boys, come on, Drew. You're usually not that segmented, but okay. Look, I just think I'm just a little surprised in that regard. But look, at the same time, they maybe need to change the narrative a little bit, right? They need to kind of get the focus off of the fact that, hey, the running it back, which nobody seems to love, is what's happening. So this certainly changed.
But they are still running it back.
I understand it,
Dave. Right? They're running it back with the same roster. And,
I understand.
And this to me changes very little, right? Like the fact of the matter is, Wheeler is a declining player. We all agree with that, right? He's not the same guy that led the Jets in scoring back in 2017-18. He's not, a premier right winger anymore. No. He just isn't. He's a useful player. He's still a top 6 player, in my opinion. Should he get as much power play time as he does? Probably not, considering there's, other skilled players on the Jets, namely Ehlers and Cole Perfetti. Perfetti is going to get some power play time. It's probably going to be second power play time, but I don't think it's going to be long. I think, Dave, you'd agree with that, right? Before Perfetti's on the top power play unit, right? So they are running it back. And yeah, I agree with the narrative of everything like that. But you mentioned restructuring, that's a joke. They stripped Wheeler of his captaincy. This is no different than any other captain, and I think especially because Wheeler was captain for 6 years, and all of the players that have come and gone, over those 6 years, right? We're talking about Patrick Laine, we're talking about Jacob Trouba, right? I'm not saying Wheeler's the reason why these guys left. I'm just saying that the circumstances are a little bit different in a market like Winnipeg that's only had 2 captains in 11 years, right? So, I mean, I just think this is, as you said, overdue. It's not going to change much. We know that guys like Morrissey, Lowry, Connor, these guys are leaders. They're probably going to get the A's on their jersey. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Ehlers also gets an A, right? Like this, I think also takes some pressure off of Wheeler. He can just focus on playing hockey, right, Dave? So I just think that I agree though with the timing. I mean, you easily could have made this announcement 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. I mean, it has been over 2 months since Rick Bowness was hired. So to think that Rick Bowness just got around to having a chat with Wheeler 2 days ago, to me is a little absurd.
Well, the part that's so, I mean, you talk about the timing aspect, Ezzy. What's interesting, this is an organization that is usually, got all their ducks in a row. The fact that they made this announcement while at the same time Scheifele was off in, where was he, Vegas, doing the NHLPA or the NHL media tour is unlike this organization. It's unlike them to do something like that when when Scheifele is now sort of got the spotlight on him, to where you're going to see what his reaction is all about as well. So that is, it wasn't as buttoned down, I would say, as this team usually is. I mean, you remember when they finally, when Byfuglien's contract was terminated, after the back and forth, and it was officially terminated, and then the Jets, in a very Jets style way, brought Wheeler out to speak about it. But of course, they waited until he was in St. Louis on a road game to speak about it, when there was, obviously fewer media, less attention than had it been in Winnipeg. That's the Jets organization, from the PR side of things, that I'm used to seeing. Yesterday was a little more shoot from the hip than I'm used to seeing, which is different for them. And I think as a result, I think you saw Scheifele sort of on his heels a little bit in trying to come up with an answer for it. And, if you hear what Scheifele said, which was, of course, we all support Blake. This is sort of coming as a shock. Blake is a strong voice in the room. He was, if you heard from Scheifele's perspective or from Scheifele's answers, you'd be like, well, why is this changing? Again, it just didn't seem, it wasn't as smooth a transition, I would say, as you're used to seeing from this organization, which maybe speaks to some of the divide that might exist that they're trying to work through ahead of the start of training camp next week.
Yeah. And I think I was just going to say, like, that's why it's a curious decision. And I think it's one that we all anticipated, but I still think, like you said, Drew, I think everybody is still shocked by the fact that the Jets pulled the trigger, did what they probably needed to do. And, now we're everybody's scrambling. And you're right. Like, it was clear that Mark Scheifele didn't know, because he joked saying, couldn't they have waited till after I was done my media here in Vegas before I actually had to speak about this, so I wouldn't have to have that dialogue. And, it's interesting because there is, I wonder, right? I wonder about the whole veterans versus younger guys in terms of, like, the Scheifele, Lowry, Morrissey. Those are the younger. Connor and Hellebuck. Those are two last names. But I think that I do wonder if you're seeing that sort of split, right? You have the Wheeler, Stasny's crew, and then you've got the younger guys. And I think Scheifele might have been a bridge between that group, but I don't know that it was necessarily, like, significantly tied between them. And I think what we're seeing now is that separation. And I think it's a good separation. I think the reality is, and we've all talked about this, and we can talk about who should be the next captain later. And the Jets, for the record, didn't rule out having a captain this season. They said they will not start the 22-23 season without a captain. They just didn't say that they wouldn't have a captain all season long. So
I'd be surprised if they did.
Fine, sure, of course. But I'm saying that, they with all the uncertainty, what do you do, right? In theory, Mark Scheifele was the heir apparent, but based on his comments, I know he's walked them back, but is he still the heir apparent?
Josh Morrissey can wait to get his seat. He'll be the next captain.
I think Morrissey or Lowry, two guys who are committed to the city and speak as well as anybody in the NHL world do. I think it's a no-brainer that it would be Lowry or Morrissey. I think they have the temperament. I think they both have the right.
Sitting there, Dave.
No, I don't know. Well, not really. I think that either guy could fill the job admirably, because I think that they have the proper temperament to be in a Canadian market, speaking to the media constantly.
You obviously didn't check my Twitter poll.
I saw your informal Twitter poll. I didn't get a chance to vote in your.
Morrissey's running away with it with over 50%.
Okay, well, there you go. That is as scientific as they get in the ICSEG, Gallup poll.
Hey, His Royal Majesty doesn't just come out with unscientific polls.
Okay,
my polls can stand up to any Ipsos Reid poll any day.
Fair enough. But I would go Josh Morrissey simply because I think, like I said, I've been saying that for years now, that I think Josh Morrissey could be the next captain. But I just think Adam Lowry is well respected. He also could be in that running. But I think that this is, Ezzy, I think the point you made is a good one. And I think it's a key one. I think the reality is, regardless of what you're going to do with Blake Wheeler, right? The Jets aren't going to trade him right now because the whole situation is kind of bizarre, radioactive. And clearly they weren't able to when everything was kind of copacetic, right? Like in the summer. So they're not going to be able to do it right now. So what do they need? They need Blake Wheeler they need Blake Wheeler anyways, because remember, guys, they don't have any depth on the right wing. So they actually need Blake Wheeler to be an effective player if this, quote, running it back is actually going to be successful. And so I think by removing Blake Wheeler, and he joked about it at the end, he said, well, you're going to talk to me a lot less now this year. And that's true. And I actually think for Blake Wheeler's perspective, that's a good thing. And I think it's for the Jets' perspective, it's a good thing. And I think for the media's perspective, it's a good thing. So I think that nobody is going to complain about this move other than, actually, I don't think anybody's complaining about this move.
No, I think it's a move that, I don't think anybody quibbles with the move. It's a move that, I think from my perspective was relatively obvious. And it just, it changes the dynamic a little bit. It allows Rick Bowness to say that he's beginning to, exert his influence on the team. I think it's evident that under Paul Maurice, and forget about the Dave Lowry era, because I mean, that just was obviously not going to work out. That became clear. Under
it also
Paul
lasted only 3 months, Drew.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Under Paul Maurice, I mean, we knew that the Jets dressing room and was a bit of a country club, and I think this is beginning to end the country club vibe that existed there. Paul Maurice's influence in that room was obviously only so deep. And it was Blake Wheeler's room. It was Blake Wheeler's team, and Paul Maurice, nothing he could do, not that he necessarily tried to do anything, could change that. It was obvious that it was Wheeler's room. And then this move yesterday by Rick Bowness is beginning to pull back on whose room it is. That it's not necessarily one player's room, that the coach is going to have a voice in there. The coach is going to have a strong voice. It's going to be new systems, new deployment of ice time, new strategies, new approaches, a new commitment is required. All those things that for whatever reason just were no longer resonating and were no longer viable under a Wheeler captaincy and a Maurice coach team. So it is, I think, almost if hiring Bowness and Maurice being gone has turned the page on the Jets, in the Jets book, this move is the end of a chapter in the Jets book. I mean, this is a significant step in the next, this year, 3 years, 5 years are obviously going to look very different as a result of this decision.
Yeah, yesterday's news basically ends the Blakeocracy, and we're now in a Bonocracy, right? So, I mean, that's what has happened here. No, obviously, I think it's been overblown a little bit, guys. That this is Rick Bowness putting his stamp on the team. This is just a move that, as Drew mentioned many times, is overdue, and to me, and I think a lot of people, was the obvious move. Now we can debate again about the timing. Should this have happened, several weeks earlier, a month earlier? Yeah, I think the optics would have been much better to announce this when everybody's at the cottage and there's less training camp in mind, because training camp of course just starts in a couple of days, right? So on the 22nd. So I agree with you, Drew. I mean, I think this is absolutely tied in to, we talked about this last week, how close the Jets were to trading Wheeler. We don't know how close they were, but we know that Chevy was having his quote unquote discussions with other GMs, right? And I think if the Jets weren't willing to eat any of that salary, I don't think many teams, were going to bite. Like, Max Pacioretty was given away for future considerations from the Golden Knights to the Hurricanes, guys. Yes, it was a different situation, and Pacioretty unfortunately is going to miss. But the point is that the trade market was not super hot for Blake Wheeler. Like, there weren't a lot of teams that were saying, yeah, give me Wheeler and I'll give you a first-round pick and a prospect, and we'll take all of his $8.25 million salary. Like, I think the Jets were probably going to have to throw in a sweetener. And no, it was not going to be Ville Heinola, but I do think that, the Jets were probably going to have to eat half of the salary or entice another team in some other way, right, guys? I think you'd agree with that. But the point I'm trying to make here is removing the C from him, I think, is tied into the fact that he's got 2 years left on his contract, and he is a guy that could be moved before the trade deadline. Again, I'm not saying that he will be, but now that we know that, I mean, it was back in early June, late May, when Frank Saravalli put Wheeler on the trade bait board, and that basically set off a tire fire here in Winnipeg, because prior to that, it was all Mark Scheifele trade rumors, right? So I do think you make a good point, Drew, when you say the Jets 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now are going to look very different, and most likely are not going to have Blake Wheeler. It's weird to think, guys, that Jets 2.0 one day won't have Wheeler, because he's the only guy remaining from the Atlanta Thrashers, and he's been here for, as we mentioned, 11 years. But it's going to happen eventually. I mean, the new core of this team, as we talked about, Connor, Ehlers, Perfetti, I mean, Dubois, asterisk, there's a chance that he's gone in 2 years. But, this is a younger core. I would throw in Ville Heinola, Dylan Sandberg. Like, the old core of the Jets from 4 or 5 years ago, there's a good chance they won't be here a couple of years from now. So why wait? You might as well make this decision now before training camp starts and, basically take Wheeler down a notch.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Reduce his influence. You still need him to perform on the ice. And when we come back, we'll talk about his impact on the ice for this team and how necessary that is and how the Jets are going to look on the ice with training camp less than a week away. Don't go anywhere. Much more Jets talk to come. Scotty Billeck at the top of hour number 2. It's a Saturday morning. His Royal Highness is here. Dave M is here. I'm Drew Mindell. Stay tuned. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whitened my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
It's the bottom of the hour on a rainy and gray Saturday, the 17th of September. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey.
Thanks, Buzz Killington.
Well, I'm just being honest. It's not that nice out, but it's always warm with you guys here in studio and all of our loyal audience that joins us each and every Saturday. This segment brought to you by Betway, one of the most trusted voices in sports betting, both in Canada and all around the world. Betway is a sports betting app that puts you, the customer, at the forefront with a large selection of betting options in sports, as well as strong promotions and fair odds What are you waiting for? Head on over to Betway and bet your way. Must be 19 years or older to play. Please play responsibly. So we've talked about the off-ice impact and the dressing room impact of this decision of the removal of Blake Wheeler, of the captaincy from Blake Wheeler. What about the on-ice, impact? Because truthfully, and I know that Blake Wheeler is overpaid based on his production, but we knew that was going to happen the day he signed this contract. So take the salary out of the equation right now, because that's not his fault. That's the contract that the Jets agreed to with him. Good on Blake for getting that amount of money. You look at this Jets roster, they need almost a rejuvenated Blake Wheeler, which is sort of ironic, as we're talking about him, getting stripped of the captaincy and the impact that's going to have, but they also need him to be performing at a pretty high level, to be successful, because they don't have a ton of forward depth. It is not the same forward depth that they had last year, especially in that top 6 group. So what do you think the impact of this move will have on Blake Wheeler in terms of on-ice performance?
Yeah, it's a more important question for me, Drew. And, I think that he still has to be in your top 6, right? Like, I think we all expect Cole Perfetti to play in the top 6 on the wing. I mean, will he play a little bit of center? I mean, I think it's unlikely with Scheifele and Dubois 1-2 up the middle, right? So I think we'd all expect, Perfetti to have a full-time role in the top 6. But I just don't think that there's anybody, like, tell me who else on this Jets roster right now can play the role of Blake Wheeler. Like, I just don't see it happening. Like, all due respect to guys like Morgan Barron and Jansen Harkins, Mason Appleton, I'd throw in there as well. Like, these guys are bottom 6 forwards right now on this team. Like, a guy like Morgan Barron, he's 23 years old, right, Dave? So I'm not saying Barron, can't play in the top 6 eventually, but this is a guy that has 20 games of NHL experience, 30 games of NHL experience. Like, you can't ask him to play the majority of the season in your top 6 and play, top power play or even second power play. Like, Wheeler's going to still play on the power play. Could that be a reduced role on the second power play? Sure. But he's going to play on the power play. Like, this guy has been making his living for years on the power play. But it's funny. We all know that Wheeler's stats really haven't declined as much as people, offensive stats haven't declined as much as people want to say. Like, he's nearly a point per game player. Like, what did he have? 60 points in 65 games in the lockout. Pardon me, not the lockout. The COVID shortened season. What did he have? Like 45 and 50, something like that, right, boys? So, I mean, this is still a guy that's, produces offensively at the top 6 level. The key for me is how Wheeler plays an overall game, and not just, if he gets out on the penalty kill. Like, you want to see him busting his butt and leading by example defensively. And we all know that the biggest shortcoming of this Jets team has been the defensive play of some of their top forwards. And Mark Scheifele is right at the top of the list. I think Kyle Connor, could be better defensively. I mean, it's tough to, criticize Connor too much when he has, 47 goals, 92 points, whatever he had last year, right? But this is the reality for this Jets team. I agree with you, Drew. Like, Kopp and Stastny are gone, and you haven't replaced them with players. You can't say that, the Jets of the young players are going to replace these guys. I mentioned it. I think it was 98 points. I said 100 points last week, but Stastny and Kopp combined had 100 points. And could Perfetti and Morgan Barron together, along with, Harkins or Gustafson, could they put in 100 points? It's possible, but you're asking a lot out of, first and second year players, right? So for me, the biggest, I think proof that, Wheeler is committed, and I'm not saying he's not going to be committed, but I'm just saying that he has to be a great all-around player for this Jets, because this Jets team is not the team from 3 years ago that can win games, 7-5 every night. They can sometimes, but when they're going against top teams in their division or across the league, they just don't have the firepower anymore. They don't have the veteran. It's going to be a much younger team this year. So I think not having the C is going to benefit him, but I really don't think, we've been covering this team for 11 years now. This is the 12th season. We know what Wheeler is at this point. I mean, he's a great offensive player. He leads by example. I don't think much is going to change. I wouldn't be surprised if he's, nearly a point per game, kind of around that, kind of 70 to 75 point range again, especially if he plays on the top power play. So I think he's going to be motivated. And regardless if, he becomes trade bait closer to the trade deadline, I think that, Wheeler's still going to have a big impact in the top 6.
Dave M?
Well, usually you interject, Drew. I wasn't expecting you just to throw it to me that quickly, but
to keep you guessing.
You do. That's what we talked about last week in our first show back. So I guess I should have been aware. But look, I'm with in the sense, and that's what I talked about in the first segment of the show, was that you are going to need him. You don't have someone who's replacing. He's still almost a game player. And as someone just pointed out, and I think it was Robert Palmer said in the chat, I mean, we look better from the All-Star break on, right? So he did look like he can still get it done. And I think, you can't discount him. He is, as I said, the Jets have no depth on right wing. And when you lose Kopp and Stastny, look, the reality is you can't rely on hockey's a team game. You can't rely on two players. Kopp and Stastny could have been injured. They had to deal with, situations last year, or you traded him. You have to find replacements from within. But at the same time, right now, we know the Jets don't have the same depth at the forward position as they do on defense. And there's some unknowns in this lineup that we're not super certain about in terms of, guys like Saku Menalainen and that sort of thing. But at the same time, there seems to be, and we've got Sam Gagner, obviously, who's going to be a new face in the room. But as Ezzy and I talked about during the break, there really aren't a lot of new faces. Now, what is there that's new? There's opportunity. And I talked about it last week. And I think that I hate to say this person can't do X, because you don't know. You don't know what happens when you give that person that opportunity to thrive. And if someone is given an opportunity to take on a bigger role and they run with it, well, then that's a good thing. And the good thing with the Jets is that they have a lot of different players that could be given an opportunity and could potentially thrive. So maybe Cole Perfetti is the first up, because he's, of course, the one that they're going to be focused on. Hey, maybe Chaz Lucius is ready. We talked about the Chaz, earlier in the week, feels like a lifetime ago. And he talked about wanting to be, a Jet, not in the WHL, not in the AHL, but he wanted to talk about that. And I thought he looked pretty good when he was skating. And of course, that was a very small sample size of watching. And I was doing a lot more yapping than I was watching. But the reality on day one of rookie camp, but the reality for me was that there are opportunities for guys to seize that we weren't expecting. I'm not putting it on Brad Lambert, despite the fact that he had a silky smooth goal last night in the rookie game, although I only watched admittedly about 5 minutes of the rookie game. But the truth is that I think that that's the one thing I don't want to discount. I don't want to discount guys like Cole Perfetti and Morgan Barron and David Gustafson and Jansen Harkins seizing an opportunity and saying, here's a chance, right? All we talk about generally is logjam, and it's a huge logjam in front of me. Well, that logjam is now removed, and now I've got an opportunity to, be a top six forward. Or maybe again, the Jets change their mindset and don't worry about it just being a top six. Actually have a top 9 that can score, play defense, score. Because again, it's not just Mark Scheifele we're talking about when it comes to defense, right? It's Kyle Connor's defense isn't great. There's a lot of guys who need to improve defensively that I think within a new system will. And I think one of those things will be balance. I mean, so opportunity, my 2 buzzwords, I always make fun of everybody else having buzzwords. I'm going to have 2 buzzwords for this season: balance and opportunity. And I think if the Jets create a balanced lineup, the opportunity that some of these young guys are going to be thirsting for, like I said, a Jansen Harkins, Morgan Barron, a David Gustafson, a Cole Perfetti, I think someone will rise up and seize it. Because like I said, I've said this all along, David Gustafson is Andrew Kopp light. I'm not saying he's Andrew Kopp, but I think he's an Andrew Kopp light. I think he's defensively very similar to Kopp. I don't think he's got the same offense. I think he's got a little more offense to give than you might expect. So I'm not suggesting that David Gustafson is coming along and becoming Andrew Kopp tomorrow, but I think that he's got the potential, based on what I've seen him do in his very large sample size in the AHL, to be an effective player at the NHL level, obviously provided he stays healthy. So we'll see, but I don't want to discount the opportunity that some of these young guys are going to seize with the opportunity within the Jets framework.
Nobody's discounting this, Dave. The reality is that these guys just aren't as good as Kopp and Stastny. Like, you talk about potential. I agree with you that David Gustafson has high potential and Cole Perfetti has a really high ceiling, but these guys are, 20, 21 years old, and the Jets need to win hockey games this year. So I'm not trying to be negative here. I'm just saying that, like, these guys are going to have to play. It's not a question of seizing an opportunity. These guys will be in the opening night lineup. I don't know exactly where David Gustafson will be, but, Cole Perfetti is going to be, one of the starting 12 forwards. I think we'd all agree with that, right? Like, it's time. He's healthy, but he's still learning the pro game. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is I don't have a lot of confidence that this Jets team is going to make the 9-point gap up and make the playoffs this year. I mean, I just like, you talk about like Gustafsson being, Andrew Kopp light, Dave. Like, do you think Gustafsson's going to hit 55 points in the NHL? Like, maybe he does, but I don't think that's going to happen.
It's a lot to ask for a guy in his first year.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's played a little bit in the NHL, but that's my whole point here. Like, this is going to be a much younger team, and I'm not, poo-pooing on these guys, because I like I like the Gus Bus. I'm on board with the Gus Bus. He's a really good player for the Moose, and I think he's going to be a really good player for the Jets. But Andrew Kopp and Paul Stastny are established NHL players that I said, again, a combined 98 points. Are, Cole Perfetti and Morgan Barron, if you want to use those two, are they going to be able to hit 98 points? I don't think they're going to come close.
I agree with you, Ezzy, and that really is a frightening proposition to begin with. But I do agree with you that they're not going to be able to replace what Kopp and Stastny brought to the table. Not in the score sheet. I mean, it's going to take an entire rethinking of the Jets.
Well, and they're both great special teams players as well. Yeah. I mean, like a guy like Sam Gagner, he's going to play on the penalty kill. But Andrew Kopp was the Jets, best or second best penalty killer for how many years? 5, 6, 7 years. So again, like, I'm optimistic that if everything goes right, the Jets can make the playoffs. And if you ask me, how many points, it's not just about points, but the point I'm trying to make is just the quality of talent, the forward depth just isn't as good. So yes, there is going to be the opportunity for young players, but the Jets need to win hockey games, Dave. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I just think that I think some of these guys, and maybe I have more faith because I watched these guys play, in the AHL a lot more than most folks. I just think like David Gustafsson, I mean, why can't he play? He can do everything Andrew Kopp can do on the PK. Like, he's just as good as Andrew Kopp is on the PK. He's just as good defensively, I would say, as Andrew Kopp is. I mean, and again, I don't think he's got the same offensive abilities, so I call him Andrew Kopp light, but I think that he can replace some of the things you've lost. Now, I think
how many points can you tell me how many points you think Gustafsson can get next year?
I don't know. I mean, it's going to depend on his opportunity. I mean,
20 points, 25 points.
Well, first of all, I don't have to answer until Drew does his over/under for our show in a few weeks. But
Gustafsson, yeah, he could play on the penalty kill, Dave. But like, he's most likely going to be on the fourth line.
No, I agree.
10 minutes a night. I don't think he's going to be have anywhere close to the impact that Kopp has had this year.
But Ezzy, what did Kopp get? Kopp had opportunity, right? Kopp, when he was a third line guy, wasn't putting up the points. When Kopp,
he's also 28 years old.
Right. Of course. But I'm saying that he got the opportunity to move up. For traditionally, he was a third line guy who didn't get that opportunity, was seen as a third line guy beside Adam Lowry. And that was it. And then you had injuries that necessitated him going into the lineup higher up, and he took advantage of it. And so he took advantage of his quote opportunity. And I'm just saying that guys like Morgan Barron can step in. I'm not saying that they're going to put up the exact same amount of points. Let me be clear of that. Guys who are going to be playing full-time in the NHL, potentially for the first time in their careers, I'm not expecting that. I'm just suggesting that I think with the balance within the lineup, you may not need to get as much scoring out of an Andrew Kopp and a Paul Stastny because you're getting it through a committee. Maybe Adam Lowry steps up, right? Maybe Adam Lowry is playing with Blake Wheeler on that third line and Morgan Barron. And guess what? Now your third line's actually producing. I'm just suggesting that there are ways that you can still win without having individual. Look, the Jets you talk about 100 points, Ezzy. Jets didn't make the playoffs. So that's great that the Jets had 100 points from those guys, but it didn't contribute to them winning sufficiently to get into the playoffs. So who cares? I think what matters is that you have enough of your team at the end of the game has enough wins to get you into the playoffs. And that's all that matters. And that's why I said, I think balance will be more important than the individual contributions of two players.
I was reading Murat's column in The Athletic, or his article in The Athletic later last night, after, he published, after everyone published their responses to the Wheeler news. And I was struck by the tone that Murat took. I don't know if you guys have had the opportunity to read it, but this is the opening paragraph. Winnipeg announced the removal of Blake Wheeler's captaincy on Friday, and in doing so, built upon a troubling recent pattern of attempting whole solutions with half measures. And then he goes on in the article to say the Jets would have been better off, trading Wheeler. That, even that might have been difficult, but that this decision to remove Wheeler's captaincy is basically saying it's a half measure. It's not going to actually solve anything. I thought that was a really interesting perspective. I thought that was a
is taking the C off a half measure, or is not trading Wheeler a half measure? Like, to me, like I would lean towards the latter. Like, I don't necessarily agree with it being a half measure in the sense of having an impact on the team, right? Like, we mentioned this earlier, guys. Like, whether Wheeler is wearing the C or not, does that change how this team is going to do this year?
I think it has to. I think it has to. If it's the same team and
the same players,
dynamic,
though, Drew, like this, the players, like to Dave's point, the same players have to get it done. I'm sorry, maybe we'll disagree, but I think that what it really does is it takes pressure off of Wheeler and it gives a louder voice to other players. But I don't think like the Jets are going to be, there's going to be a 10-point difference if Wheeler's the captain versus not being a captain. I mean, the Jets are going to struggle to get into the playoffs. They're not anywhere close to Colorado. And even look at teams like St. Louis and Minnesota. Like, to me, the Blues and the Wild are still the second and third best teams. So the Jets are going to be battling Nashville, and they're going to be battling Dallas. They're definitely not going to be battling Chicago or Arizona because they're a laughingstock. They're going to be awful, and they're going to be in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. But I don't know if it's a half measure. I think not trading him, these are two separate. These are not, to me, two related things. I think that this needed to be done. Not trading him, again, it goes back to how many teams, did Blake Wheeler want to go to? And what were the Jets preparing to give up? Because I bet most teams wanted the Jets to eat half of that salary.
Well, I mean, I think that if I'm reading Murat's column correctly, I think his advocacy is more that they should have the Wheeler should have been removed, almost even if the cost or even if the return wasn't significant. That it was time to do right by the player in moving him out to a new market, and it was time to do right in the dressing room by moving him out, and changing that dynamic regardless of what the return would have been. I think that's what Murat is saying in his column, and the Jets choosing to do it this way is almost more of it's not actually solving the problem. It's a half measure, which is clearly what he stated. It's a half measure. I don't know that it is a half measure. I don't think you can give away Blake Wheeler and not get anything in return and still at the same time expect to be able to be taken seriously as a playoff contender.
Especially, Drew, as you guys would agree, if you're not eating the salary. Like, this is the thing in hockey. We've been doing the show for so long. Guys are what their salary is. Like, if Blake Wheeler was making $5 million a year, nobody's criticizing him as much. I don't care what you say. I think it's because he's a 36-year-old in the last 2 years of his contract. Like, Wheeler has been the franchise for so long. I mean, obviously the Jets have had other great players, namely, Scheifele, Connor, Ehlers. I mean, a lot. Morrissey, Hellbuck. There's a lot of great players, but we mentioned Kopp. But I mean, I think if the Jets were to eat that salary, I hate to fixate on this, but I really do think if the Jets would have eaten half that salary, maybe they could have gotten something back. But the Pacioretty trade, and that's mentioned in Murat's article, by the way, I mean, the trade market just wasn't that good. So the Jets were not going to get, JT Miller back for Blake Wheeler. Like, the Jets weren't going to get like a 90-point player back for Wheeler, considering that the Jets, other teams knew that the Jets wanted to move him and wanted to move that salary, right? So that's all I'm saying. I agree with you. I don't think I think not trading him is a half measure, but I don't think removing the C is a half measure. I think with a guy like him, and you could tell it yesterday, Dave was there. Was he not defensive and, unhappy? Like, Wheeler, and I don't know why you would be happy to talk about having the C stripped from you, but to me, Wheeler was a guy that, he was knocked down a peg, the C was taken off, and a little bit of, the air was taken out of his balloon.
I would say, just to speak to the idea of his attitude at the thing, he actually was fine. But prior to going on with us live, I mean, he wasn't jokey, but he wasn't.
He never is, though. That's not his personality.
No, but I mean, like, he wasn't like, he didn't come in there. Like, he actually did. He was smiling before, like, he was asked a question. He smiled about it, but like, he wasn't like, I mean, he wasn't petulant. He I mean, again, as he said, what's he going to be? He's not going to be in a jovial mood. I mean, he has to come and answer questions about why a team is stripping him of the captaincy. So, I mean, he's not going to be like, hey, let's, how's everybody's summer been? How are you? I mean, he's clearly, and like you said, Drew, he's not like that at the best of times. So at the blurst of times, it's not going to be so sunny. There was no sunshine yesterday. The rain was an appropriate weather for the mood, around the Iceplex. But, Rick Bowness spoke about it, and I don't know if you want to talk about it now or if you want to talk about it after we have Scotty on. But, I mean, Rick, the way I'm just saying, he tried to, first of all, he wanted to keep it internal, didn't want to discuss how they had the conversation or the tone of the conversation. But he basically said, without saying, that we are looking for a new group of leadership, and not necessarily the guys who already wore letters on their jerseys. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're automatically guaranteed, with the exception of course, of Blake Wheeler, that you're going to be wearing a letter on your jersey. So the idea was, he said, and one of the quotes that resonated, it seemed to be with folks on the old Twatter machine, but like he basically said, some of the best leaders he's played with in the NHL or coach never wore a letter on their jersey, didn't wear a C, didn't wear an A. So that doesn't necessarily make you a great leader, right? There's guys who don't like to have to speak to the media who show leadership in that room, right? And so I don't think he's looking for that, but I also think he knows that. I mean, he tried to put a bit of a positive spin, and we can talk about it with Scotty, but I think his focus, which is a lot of this is now in the past, even though of course it was basically in the present, and our focus has to be on the Winnipeg Jets. And when he was asked, well, do you plan on having leaders by this day? And really what his point was, and whether he's being honest or fully candid or not, who knows, but he essentially said, I get the impression with him, he was pretty candid, but he said, look, we've got 21 days and 6 training camp days to kind of get this all figured out and determine what we want this to look like. And Weber asked him, are you thinking like 2 alternates at home and 2 alternates on the road, switching that up? And look, we saw that with the Moose, right? When Peter Stojkovic, I hate to make everything a Moose minute, but when Peter Stojkovic, the Winnipegger, the final Atlanta Thrashers draft pick of all time, when he
St. Paul's grad, when he retired from hockey and gave up the C, Moose didn't have a C, so they did it by committee. Eventually, they settled on Jimmy Olney, who I think is a good captain. But you know what I mean? Like, the point is that you had guys step up by committee, and what it did, again, I'm not trying to make this too much about the Moose, but it allowed guys like Johnny Kovacevic to step up and assume more of a leadership role. David Gustafsson step up and assume more of a leadership role. You had guys seize, again, we're using Dave M's buzzword, an opportunity that the coaching staff said, look, we see something in you that could be very good for our group moving forward. We're going to bestow this on you. And again, the Moose are a different animal than the Jets, but I just think that this is going to provide that with
an animal at all.
What are they?
The Jets
an inanimate object.
The Moose are an animal. The Jets aren't an animal.
Well, that's true. And Jeff Cable says, hold on, where is he? Moose minutes are always welcome. Doesn't matter what time of day. I agree with Jeff. That's there's no question about that.
I think that's the next, look, I think by this obviously reduces Wheeler's impact in the room, and it reduces his voice in the room. I think it also probably reduces Scheifele's impact in the room, and it reduces Scheifele's voice in that room. This is the opportunity that I think some of those other guys have been clamoring for, and now it's staring them in the face. It's staring Morrissey and Lowry, but those guys always spoke, and they spoke eloquently last year in the midst of all the shit that was going around.
But more importantly, it's Kyle Connor,
Nikolai Ehlers. Yeah. Absolutely. Those are the guys I see stepping up and having a greater role, in this team and in how they're viewed and how they're perceived. I mean, look, these players, and the NHL is the worst high school in the world in terms of gossip. So if it's a poisonous atmosphere in Winnipeg, you best know that every other dressing room knows that in the league. If it's a poisonous atmosphere in any market, all the other 31 markets know it as well. So this is going to be just it's an opportunity for the transition. Can Blake Wheeler comfortably handle that transition? I think he can. I think he
can too.
I think
and that's why, Drew, sorry to cut you off. I was going to say, I think the proof is going to be the way Wheeler plays on the ice and how, he conducts himself off the ice. And Dave's right. Blake mentioned this, like, he's going to speak less with the media.
Yeah.
I mean, because we know the captain is required to talk to the media more than any other player. So it's going to be the way he plays this year, in a year in which he knows the Jets are less talented and he could be moved prior to the trade deadline. But because he's 36 years old, because he's been here for 11 years, I don't think he's going to sulk. And he mentioned, like, he's not going to be a wallflower Like, of course he's not. He's still going to have a voice. It's just going to be less of a voice. And that's why, I mentioned earlier when Dave mentioned the symbolism of this, I do think it's more than just symbolism. I mean, the C is obviously the symbol, but it's what it means, right? And whether or not you think, NHL teams, really need to have C's, if that's like an archaic thing, I do think, it's still having a letter on your jersey, I do still think matters. So the way he plays, because I agree with you 100%. They're going to need Wheeler probably more than they've needed him, since that 2017-18 season when they had the 114-point season and they went to the conference finals against Vegas. Like, they're going to need him. I mean, whether he gets 70 points or 60 points, the point is they're going to need him to be a contributor on both sides of the puck. So I think the proof is going to be in the pudding, and I think Wheeler will be fine. And I'm going to be, quite frankly, happy to not have to talk about this anymore, because there is going to be a new captain. Maybe not this year, it'll be next year. I do personally think it's going to be Morrissey, and I'm with Dave. If it's not Morrissey, it'll probably be a lousy. But it's time to put this to bed. It's not Wheeler's team anymore.
And that is the headline entering training camp for the Winnipeg Jets, that it's no longer Blake Wheeler's team. You're absolutely right. When we come back, Scott Billeck of the Winnipeg Sun joins us. We'll talk more about this. We'll look ahead to training camp. We'll talk about EDM, because we all know how much Scott enjoys that. Much more to come. It's a Saturday morning. Hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show is up next. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you, but why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, sorry, that was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now. We're live on YouTube. Dave Minuk is in the top right. Ezra's holding up a newspaper. Scotty Billeck's in the bottom left. Somebody reads it to him, or he looks at the pictures. We're not sure which of those two things he does, but I assume that at least he was holding up your article, because it'd be kind of rude if he was holding up something that wasn't yours.
Well, I always buy the Winnipeg Sun and support you, Scotty, and Ted, and everybody else at the Sun. Always.
I appreciate it.
Can you hear me? Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, we're good. All right, good.
You're good. Want to make mention before we start the interview with Scotty, want to welcome aboard a brand new sponsor to us here at the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Our good friends at the Keg have signed up with us, so we wish them a big welcome. Encourage all of our audience to, of course, patronize the good folks at the Keg, and I personally am looking forward to being there so often that I get diagnosed with gout. That's my goal. I'm looking forward to that. Get a little gout in the foot; it'll taste good in the belly. A little gout in the
Scotty,
foot.
we're gonna hook you. We're gonna take you out for a little steak and Billy Miner pie. So just keep your schedule open. That's gonna come up a little bit later.
And gout.
Yeah,
and
gout. It's enough
right.
steak that you get gout. Yeah, a Billy Miner pie there, Ezzy. That's what you're going. I'll tell you what, you're in rare form there, Mr. Ginsburg. You're in rare form on this Saturday morning. Scotty, good morning. How are you, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Busy day. It was a good sleep last night. So, but yeah, no, busy day yesterday, and yeah, I'm interested to see how kind of today goes. How people kind of take in the sober second thought and talk about kind of what happened yesterday. But yeah, no, otherwise, yeah, doing good. Can't complain. Hockey's back. Yeah,
let's start with that. Fun. Obviously yesterday was a big news day, and you've been gathering reaction from all over the Twitter sphere for the good and the bad that certainly provides. What about your reaction? When you saw, it was shaping up to be sort of a regular Friday. There wasn't a lot that you thought was going to be a hot button issue. The players were skating. The Young Stars game didn't seem like it was going to be a 5-alarm fire sort of day. But then boom, it happened. So what was your reaction to the news of the yesterday morning?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a little bit of surprise, but then when you kind of stop to think about what had happened, even in the aftermath, even just driving to the rink to kind of talk to Blake and Rick Bowness, just kind of thinking about the last couple of years, last season in particular, this past summer, and then you're like, okay, well, maybe it's not that surprising. My biggest thing, and I know some people have disagreed with this and whatever, but I think when you're a player, especially a captain on a team, and you essentially ask for a trade or ask to work with the team to try and facilitate something potentially, I don't know how you return to the dressing room as the captain of the team. It's one of those things where if you're trying to get a foot out the door or both feet out the door with the team in whatever capacity that they were going to do, at that point, you almost have to kind of give it up. I mean, I don't know how you lead a team when you're kind of be one of the guys that maybe not want to be there. And I understand what Blake Wheeler said yesterday. I mean, I get it after 11 years and it's just not going right. And, he's 36 years old and he probably wants to win a Stanley Cup and try and close out his career like that. I mean, a lot of veterans do, especially ones that haven't yet won a Stanley Cup. I can understand that would be, what he would want to do at that point in his career. But the more that I kind of listened to, and Dave was there yesterday, you kind of listened to both guys talk, and what was said, what was left unsaid. Actions kind of screamed louder than the words did, anyways, because at the end of the day, they took the captaincy away from Blake Wheeler, and people have argued on Twitter, argued with me about, was he stripped or was he, was it just, they're going in a different direction. The fact of the matter is Blake Wheeler's not wearing the captaincy anymore. And he's the only one that we know for sure that while he might get an A, but I'm very unlikely that Blake Wheeler gets an A either. So he's the only one out of Mark Scheifele and Josh Morrissey that we know won't probably wear a letter this year. And so it creates this kind of awkward, it's an awkward situation for the Jets, because I assume, just by listening to kind of what Rick Bowness said, reading between the lines, he polled a lot of players this summer. I'm guessing one of those questions was, well, how do you think about the leadership and all that kind of stuff? And the players kind of gave him probably the unvarnished truth at times. And it was interesting, because one of the things that stood out to me the most yesterday was Rick Bowness saying, well, I need some time to get to know the players, and it takes some time to kind of understand who will be the assistants or whatever is going to happen this year. But he already knew yesterday that Blake Wheeler wasn't to be his captain, right? And so how does he get to that point over the last couple months since he was hired? And you just, I'm sure he took the inventory, talked to all the players, talked to the coach, figured out what the last couple of years have been like, and made the decision that Blake Wheeler wasn't, fit to be the captain of the team anymore. And I think two things can be true here. Blake Wheeler can be a great captain for this team and has been in the past a great captain for this team. And also, Blake Wheeler is perhaps not the right captain for this team anymore. And I don't think that's negative. I don't think that's whatever. I just think that sometimes that's the truth. This happened in 2009 with Patrick Marleau in San Jose. They stripped him of the captaincy and gave it to Joe Thornton. Kind of ironically enough, Joe Thornton would later be in the mid 2010s here, stripped of the captaincy in San Jose when they gave it to Logan Couture, right? Dustin Brown, 2 years removed from winning the second Stanley Cup in 3 years for the Los Angeles Kings, stripped of the captaincy in favor of Anze Kopitar. So I just think it was time for this team. I think everybody was screaming for change, right? I mean, and this summer wasn't full of a lot of it, especially personnel-wise, right? There is a new head coach. There's a new coaching staff in this town. But what was the tangible change that you could look to this offseason and say, okay, well, maybe this team really is heading in a different direction? I think yesterday did that, right? I think yesterday accomplished that, maybe not in a player personnel point of view, but in, there's going to be a new leadership group with this team going forward. And they're going to carry the baton into, the next season and the seasons from there. I know Rick Bowness said yesterday that, Blake Wheeler wasn't standing in the way of players and that sort of thing. But again, if there wasn't a problem, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if there wasn't a problem, why was there a change? And I think that's what you kind of have to look at this point, is that as tough as it is for some fans, I mean, I get it. Some people love Blake Wheeler. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, I think Blake Wheeler, the one thing I'll say about Blake Wheeler on the ice, that guy never took a night off and rarely took a shift off. And when he did take a shift off or didn't look like he had a good game, chances are he was nursing an injury. Blake Wheeler, everything he's done on the ice can be lauded. I mean, this is a guy that has given his all to this team every single night that he's played for the Winnipeg Jets. You can't take that away from Blake Wheeler. Those are just the facts. That's how he's played the game. Should he have sat out at times when he was injured? Whatever. I mean, this is a guy that wanted to win and wanted to help this Winnipeg Jets team win and succeed in this city. But at the same time, I think just like Paul Maurice's message, his voice and all that, it just kind of started to grow thin. And we can go back to, we can speculate whether it was Patrick Laine or whatever. I mean, was he getting in the way of those guys kind of moving into their own? Who knows? But I think just after last year, listening to the players talk about accountability and respect, and I know there were raw emotions and all that sort of thing. I just don't see how. And then after Wheeler kind of worked with the team to try and facilitate a move, I don't see how you can bring that guy back as your captain. And at the end of the day, they didn't. I mean, that was probably the biggest move of the summer for the Winnipeg Jets, was kind of changing the course of this team leadership wise and kind of starting to move to, which I assume will be a reasonably young kind of package of assistants that they finally name before the season gets underway in a couple of weeks.
Scotty, even though it pains me to say this, Drew brought up a really good point on the first half an hour of the show, talking about, the impact, the Jets stripping the captaincy from Wheeler will have on Scheifele, because, some people forget before, Frank put him on the big trade bait board, Wheeler, that is, of course. I mean, all the talk was, Mark Scheifele's, I mean, you know what comments I'm talking about after the season ended, where it seemed like, Scheifele had one foot out the door. So what kind of impact do you think, this move will have on Scheifele? Because we know, I mean, over the years, I mean, it not only has it been, quote unquote, Wheeler's room, it's been, Scheifele's room, as well. And there have been rumors about, the on ice, off ice relationship between Wheeler and Scheifele, over the years. And quite frankly, I have no idea if any of that's true. I'll just go into the assumption that, they're still good teammates and good friends. As you know, in a city like Winnipeg, we hear all these rumors all the time. I don't necessarily know that was the biggest issue, was their relationship. I think it was, as you mentioned, Wheeler's relationship with the younger players on the team. And I agree with you. It starts with, Patrick Laine back in the early years of his career. But what type of impact do you think it'll have on Scheifele? Because, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Wheeler to perform now, even though he doesn't have the C. But there's going to be a lot of pressure on Scheifele, especially considering he's only got 2 years left on his deal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see. I'm not in the group of people that think that Mark Scheifele kind of loses his A. I think you can kind of almost glean a little bit from the fact that Mark Scheifele right now is in Las Vegas as the team's representative for the NHL Player World Tour. They're stopped there in Las Vegas, the media tour, I guess it's called. And I'm uncertain that this really affects Mark Scheifele at all. In terms of his role on this team and whatever. I think, the difference between Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler, at least in terms of how they kind of went about things, is Mark Scheifele said he was contemplating his future with the team. Whether or not he wants to say that was blown out of proportion or not, I mean, his words kind of speak for themselves. That's kind of what he said. But at the end of the day, I mean, all reports indicate that he didn't ask for a trade, and I haven't heard anything otherwise, right? So I'm interested to see how Mark Scheifele plays under. I think Mark Scheifele, we watched him last year. It was a tough year. I think losing Paul Maurice, I mean, even those two, they had a tough relationship at times. But Mark Scheifele and Dave Lowry didn't get along. It was quite obvious, even in Mark's comments, earlier this year when I think you were talking to the Winnipeg Jets, Sarah Oleski. Now I always want to say TSN. That'll take some time to get used to. But no, but he was just like, I haven't had that kind of communication, I guess, from a coach. Something along the lines that Scheifele said there. I think that was kind of a bit of an indictment on both Maurice and Dave Lowry, but more so probably Paul Maurice and just kind of how that relationship had gone in the latter years. But yeah, I think this is a chance for Mark Scheifele to kind of step into a role like that and maybe step out from under the wing or the shadow of Blake Wheeler and really, kind of cement himself as that. Like I am interested because, I mean, we saw what Scheifele said, but I mean, we also see what he said, as early as last month about kind of how excited he is about this team and how his kind of whole perception has changed over the summer. I don't know what that means. I'm because the Jets didn't really do a whole lot this summer to kind of change it, but perhaps for Mark Scheifele, it was as simple as just a different voice in the room, a new head coach. I don't think Mark Scheifele is one of these players that's lazy or doesn't want to give it his all or anything like that. I mean, I think Mark Scheifele just became a little bit maybe disgruntled with the way that things were, and they lasted for a while here. I mean, we all can think back to the 27-18 that Nashville series, even the whole thing, the whole playoff run. Mark Scheifele was an animal in that series, right? I mean, in that playoff run. And nobody was talking about Mark Scheifele being whatever then and defensive liability and all that. I mean, there was talk about it, but, I think just the last couple of years have been hard on a lot of players. And I think for Mark Scheifele, one of them was it just wasn't clicking anymore. And the message wasn't getting across to him. And so I think the biggest thing to watch is how does he kind of perform under Rick Bowness? Does that kind of kickstart, not kickstart his career, but like kind of that re-kickstarted, I suppose, which is a lack of a better term. You'd think I'm a writer, but can't think of the words. But yeah, like I'm interested. I mean, he knows, Mark Scheifele is no mistake here. Mark Scheifele and Tyler Seguin are good friends. I assume Tyler Seguin said some pretty good things to Mark Scheifele about Rick Bowness too at the same time. And Rick Bowness, for as long as he's coached, I think he's touched 5 decades now in terms of his coaching career, all that kind of stuff. I mean, what he did in Dallas was, pretty good in terms of what he had there at his disposal, and what he was able to kind of get out of that team, kind of turn it into a playoff team again after it really wasn't working for Dallas before he had Jim Montgomery was getting it there before everything kind of happened there. But but it wasn't like Rick Bowness kind of dropped off or in the team. I mean, it just the Dallas Stars became a better defensive team, and they got better. So I'm interested to see. I think I think he can thrive under a new head coach, and I think for a while Mark Scheifele has probably wanted a new voice in that room, behind the bench more than maybe a captain or whatever. And I was looking at the chat here, or Blake Wheeler and him, friends, enemies, or frenemies. I think somebody said there. It's hard to say because we haven't been in the room the last couple of years. You just don't see the same interactions that you used to. Thankfully we're back in the room this year, so you kind of get better context of all that kind of stuff. But I think some of those emotions could have been just, or whatever that might be, could just be born out of the fact that of frustrations of other things that are just going to spill over into different areas. But I'm interested to see how the impact of Rick Bowness will have on Mark Scheifele, and regardless of how kind of even Blake Wheeler and the captaincy and all that. I mean, I think there's room here though for Mark Scheifele to kind of move into a more prominent leadership role. And I think, in hindsight, I think if you go back to 2016, I wonder if the Jets would actually give him the captaincy ahead of a Blake Wheeler. I mean, that's all hindsight or whatever. And I don't think that Blake Wheeler was necessarily a bad captain for this team. But I think Mark Scheifele has always wanted to wear that C or be that kind of top leader on this team, and hasn't really maybe necessarily, I guess, got the chance to do that. At least by wearing the C. I think every player, and Rick Bowness said this yesterday, I mean, every player, some of the best players he's ever coached, he claims, have been the best leaders, and they didn't wear the C. But I think for some guys, and Blake Wheeler talked about yesterday, like there was a time in his career where the C was a validating thing for him. And maybe that's not the case anymore for Blake Wheeler, but for other guys, I think that can be true too. And I think Mark Scheifele might be one of them.
Saturday morning, you're live with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Our guest is Scott Billeck from the Winnipeg Sun, discussing the news from Winnipeg Jets land that Blake Wheeler will no longer be the captain, and the team will go without a captain, at least to start the upcoming 2022 season.
Scott, it wasn't just Blake Wheeler speaking yesterday at the Iceplex. Of course, Rick Bowness had he started the day off. So what was your takeaway from his conversation, the tenor of his conversation, the points he made, and did you think he did what he needed to do, which is kind of smooth this thing over a little bit and kind of try and change the focus and be like, we got the training camp to focus on. We got all these games, and we're going to worry about leadership. Everybody's going to be a leader. What did you think? What were your takeaways from the conversation with the new Jets head coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think Rick Bowness said what he wanted to say and didn't say what he didn't want to say, and that kind of spoke volumes at times as well, right? Even to the point, I think after I asked a couple of questions, Ken Weeb, who was behind me, asked, well, is Wheeler going to be in the running for a letter? And he's like, yeah, we'll see. And then kind of he knows who his guys are and that sort of thing, but he wasn't playing his cards, right? I mean, that was sort of it too. I think he got through the day as best as they could. It's a divisive thing that happened yesterday. Even down to the wording of how it happened, stripping the C or just a reshuffle or whatever you want to call it. I mean, people are kind of up in arms about kind of talking about that. Is it too negative? Is it even the truth and all that stuff? I mean, at the end of the day, Blake Wheeler is the only one going into next season, like I said earlier, that's not going to be wearing a letter, very likely. But I thought the way that he handled it was, again, I just think that he said more in what he didn't say than he said at all, and that was kind of what I took from it. But I think I think what was also evident from Rick Bowness was that I'm the new guy. I'm taking over this team. I will run this dressing room. I will make the decisions around here, and you guys will follow. And and that's, again, for people that have been clamoring for this type of thing from Paul Maurice and kind of corral guys like Scheifele and 26 and not let them kind of run the room and get them kind of in line. I mean, I think yesterday was kind of you don't want to editorialize it too much, but it was a bit pivotal, monumental, maybe crucial. It could be one of those types of moves in this team where it's like, here you go. Here's a head coach who has come in, taken a look at what he has, under him, looking at the landscape, and decided this was a good idea. This was the right idea. I need to assert myself in this team, and this was it. I think it sent a big message yesterday that Rick Bowness runs this team, and that hasn't been the case in this town for quite some time. I don't know if you could say in many of the years that Paul Maurice was here that Paul Maurice was the guy running this team. I think it was up to the players a lot of the time, for better or for worse, and that's just the way it was. So it's interesting, and he also talked about some of the young guys, and that's the other thing that I've taken away from talking to Rick Bowness and just kind of hearing him speak at times. I'm again, we'll see what happens when training camp opens up next Thursday, but I'm expecting a lot of youth to be involved in this team and have more prominent roles in this team. He might be a bit handcuffed on defense as it stands right now. It's going to be difficult to get Villy or Dylan Sandberg into a spot at the same time, just as they're constructed right now. But if some moves are made there or anything like that before the season starts, I would expect a couple young guys on the blue line to start the year too. I think Rick Bowness is, he would have seen it with Richardson and Rope Hintz and guys like that in Dallas, that you can lean on the young kids now. I mean, these kids are coming out of the draft in their junior or their college years, ready to play in the NHL. I think the Jets have kind of been stuck in neutral when it comes to how they kind of deploy their youth. Like, where's David Gustafson been? Would we have even seen Cole Perfetti be as good as he can be at the AHL level and even in his 18 games in the NHL, play like the way that he's played? I mean, we wouldn't have, because the OHL would have been running and he just wouldn't have been eligible to play in the NHL. But at the same, he could play in the NHL, but at the same time, he wouldn't have gone down to the Moose and had that opportunity to do so. But I think that's also part of this too, is that guys like Cole Perfetti, to a lesser extent, guys like maybe Morgan Barron or some of the other younger guys that they've had or acquired that show that they can actually play and not be a liability for this team. I think Rick Bowness is of the opinion that young players can help teams and that you can put them in to prominent roles and let them go and be what they want to be, carve out their NHL careers. So I think we're going to see more prominent roles for those types of players. I think that's the other thing that happened yesterday, is that if you're going to pass, excuse me, that was a bit of a voice crack there. I'm not going through puberty. Don't worry. But
we knew it was going to happen one day, buddy. Congratulations.
Yeah, you need to have a sip of your kombucha.
I do. Yeah. There's nothing bad in here. It's just coffee. But
no judgment. It's a Saturday morning. It's a weekend.
Yeah. But no, I think Rick Bowness subscribes to the idea that a lot of coaches are starting to turn to in the NHL, that you can play some of your young, brightest prospects and they can thrive in the NHL, and you can put them in the right situations, and you don't have to necessarily always hide them behind or give them limited minutes or that. They can still make mistakes at that level, but you can still play them and they just learn. And why not? I mean, this is the thing, like, how many years have been wasted around here on certain prospects who just aren't getting their chance to play, not getting a chance to show what they can do. And then what's happening? I mean, to a lesser extent, you look at a guy like Nathan Smith. I mean, he's out there last night in Arizona scoring a pair of goals. I mean, this was a guy that just drafted in the 3rd round, I believe, in 2018, I want to say. I think that's how long ago it was now. But I mean, these are players that potentially could have been in the roster in the lineup here, but they didn't really see maybe an opportunity in this organization to kind of move up. And I think that's another thing. We'll see how it goes with Rick Bowness, but will the young prospects that these Jets players draft, like, the Chaz Luciuses to the Rutger McGroartys, those guys, are they going to see a natural path to the NHL that isn't, require a year of marinating in the AHL or whatever, just because, this team is unwilling to kind of give young guys, as it used to be, kind of those opportunities. And then if they had their opportunity and they made one mistake, they were taken out of the lineup and they wouldn't get back in. And it just was, this endless cycle of, well, we'll try this guy here and we'll try this guy there, and if it doesn't work, well, we'll just send him back to AHL because we have control over him and he's got the ability to be sent down for free and he doesn't have to to deal with waivers or anything like that. And it's like, okay, but you can do, but is that making your team better? And I don't know if that's the case. I mean, could guys like Dylan Sandberg and Billy Heinola and you can go down the list of even some of the forward prospects, just Chad's Lucius get a much bigger opportunity even this season to show what he can do in the NHL before they kind of look to see if he wants to play in the AHL or whatever. What do you do with a guy like Brad Lambert, who is, last night had a terrific game for the Jets in the prospects game? There's some negativity about Lambert and kind of how he wasn't included in the gold medal game on the roster there and all that, and he had a tough year last year. But I mean, does that guy get more of an opportunity with the Jets maybe next year? Not necessarily sure it's going to happen this year, but is it just time to start?
And Lambert's been playing pro in Finland, right, Scotty? So much different than other guys that have been playing junior or college, right?
Right, and Kevin Cheveldayoff has come out many times saying, he likes the fact that these guys play with men and all that. So again, if they're already playing with men, start playing them against men, right? Don't send Brad Lambert to junior this year. Why would you send Brad Lambert to junior this year? Like, what's the point? What's the point of a guy going back to junior at 19, lighting up the junior league? I don't know if that makes him better though. Get him accustomed to the North American game with the Manitoba Moose. Let him make his mistakes there. I mean, what we saw from what I was watching Brad Lambert last night, there's no drop off in his confidence. This guy was cutting to the net, doing all sorts of things against the Oilers prospects, right? This is what he was doing. So I think this team needs to have a different, like a reset on how it looks at its young talent. They have drafted well over the years, some good players that obviously feature in their lineup, but it's these other guys, the Gustafsons and stuff like that, who just sit in the AHL and it's like, what are you
over
doing,
marinate?
Well, over marinate, and at the same time, you're bringing in Nate Thompsons and Matt Hendrickson and Mark Letestus and Anthony Botetos, and it's like, why do you need a mid-30s guy that can play limited minutes and is on the PK specialist? What good does that help the team, right? I mean, I think it sours the experience for the younger players to the point where you see some of them leaving eventually. And I don't know. I mean, this is a hard enough city to attract. We've heard that. We see it. I mean, I've heard it. I've seen it. So then don't you have to start playing your younger players? Like, shouldn't that be the counter to the point where, well, we can't get guys here, but look at these players that we've drafted and done all this with and developed. And now we're just kind of, now we need to move them into the NHL. That should be the mantra from this team. Because, if you can't build it from outside, well, then build it from within. And that's why the Jets have focused on the draft and all that stuff. That's great. But then it's you draft, you develop, but then you have to deploy at some point. And they haven't done that part. I think we missed that third D in that thing about actually deploying the talent that you've drafted and developed. And hopefully they're going to finally get there at this point.
Scotty, lost in the shuffle of everything from yesterday. You had a really good Twitter thread about maybe about 36, 48 hours ago now, talking about the Jets business side of things. And it sort of stemmed from that CJOB Global News article about Mark Chipman, the owner of the Jets, reaching out to a select group of season ticket holders to, I guess, talk about the Jets as an investment in season tickets, because we know the team is not selling tickets like they once did. And then you went through sort of really, a good synopsis of the sort of the issues the Jets face and the perception that the Jets have versus what's going down at the University of Manitoba with the Bombers, who are the toast of the town. I just thought, to me, the word that comes to mind is there's an arrogance still within True North over how they need to deal with the public. Do you see that changing, or do you see that still just being a constant struggle that they have yet to overcome and maybe acknowledge the reality of how they're perceived?
Well, one, I don't think it has changed. Is it going to change? I think it's pertinent to the team that it does, because as you said, and we've seen, I mean, you can go on Ticketmaster right now and look how many seats are available for the opening night game in less than a month now, isn't it? Yeah, well, about a month's time against the New
14th
York
of October.
Rangers.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be unheard of that there'd be seats open for an opener, a season opener in downtown Winnipeg. And this is against the New York Rangers. This is an original 6 team with a former Jet on it. And people aren't racing to online to buy tickets or to the box office or anything like that. That's a little bit of a problem, I would suggest, and you could tell by the email or the letter that Mark Chipman sent out that there seems to be some worry there. But my interest and it's a bit of low hanging fruit to talk about the Bombers and that, and then their success right now. But as Jeff Merrick and Sportsnet like to say, low hanging fruit is still nutritious. And so it's interesting because I was there in 2013 covering the Bombers when they went through their hellacious season. It was an absolute disaster. I believe they're 3-15 that year. Ownership was in absolute shambles, or at least the people that run the club, because the club is publicly owned and ownership hasn't changed in that way. But in terms of the president and CEO and all that, Jim Bell was there, Garth Butchko. The team just wasn't being run properly. Wade Miller came over and completely changed that. And the interesting thing that I've always thought about Wade Miller, say what you want about Wade Miller, he has turned that team around. You go to a Bombers game, and there'll be people in chat here that I think would agree with this. You go to a Bomber game and you feel welcome when you're there. Wade Miller is walking around, whether it's inside the building, inside the Bomber store. Is he? He's out in the outside of the rink or outside of the stadium, and there's a little area where you can kind of a fan experience. He's out there doing that. Heck, I've seen Wade Miller walking around the tailgates talking to people. Right, this is a guy who is a president and CEO of a team that understands the people of Winnipeg. In my opinion, he understands that people here just want to feel welcome. They want to talk to a prominent figure on the team. They want to sit there and just chat hockey, or well, in this case football, with the owner or the president and the CEO of the club. And you don't. How often do we see Mark Chipman around? I mean, Mark Chipman is a nice guy. I've talked to him. He can be personable. There's all those things, but you never see the guy. We saw Mark Chipman last year, I think once. No, twice. We saw him at the Kevin Shovel press conference about Kyle Beach, and then we saw him on TSN for 10 minutes during a thing that he did with Sarah Lowe's. Yeah, and so he was not in bail. So he's not really speaking to the fans. He's not talking to the media. Whatever. He doesn't have to talk to the media. I'm not salty about it. It's fine. But I mean, it's up to Mark Chipman to make this club more appealing to fans. And you go to. I mean, I don't know. I go to the games in a different capacity than fans do. I don't spend hundreds of dollars every night. I do get in for free. I'm also working at night. It's different. I don't get to enjoy a beer and have fun and like you normally do at a hockey game. But I watch people come in, and I see it on Twitter, and I put out a tweet last night just where are people at, how do people think about it, and people talking about just the fan experience at the game. It's not that enjoyable. I mean, you go to a Bombers game, you look at the north end zone, you're like, holy smokes. Like, this is like the biggest social in Manitoba. That's what they call it. But it's fun. I mean, people aren't even watching the game half the time because they're sitting there waiting for drinks or whatever, but they're just socializing. They're having fun. I don't know. I mean, it's expensive to go to a Jets game. That's just the way it is in the NHL. The Jets are kind of middle of the road in terms of that sort of thing. So it's not like the Jets are overpricing their tickets compared to other markets or anything. Even the food is kind of not overpriced. So why is it that people aren't going to those games? Like, at what point does True North have to look inward here and stop, for lack of a term, blaming the fan base for not buying tickets and giving them reason to do so? I think for the first 10, 11 years here, there was a lot of take from the fans, and what was being given back. It's a much harder beast in the NHL to make players available to the public or whatever. The CFL, I mean, you can walk around and talk to Bombers after the game as they're coming out of the gate. You'd never see that in the NHL. The players go out underground, leave in their underground parkade, and that's it. But again, we're in a different market here in Winnipeg where, I think fans enjoy the interaction, want to talk to the players, want to talk to the coaches, want to even talk to ownership. I mean, I think it's just that's what people want here. And so I think True North has to find ways to make it more appealing to come to downtown, to come to a Jets game, to enjoy a Jets game more than just shelling out hundreds of dollars a night. And part of it too, in my opinion, is like winning fixes a lot of this. If the Jets were a successful franchise on the ice, you're going to get people there because this is a hockey mad town, right? But people want to pay money and see a winner. You can go watch the Bombers and you can get your money's worth and you're going to watch a winner. So you're already getting your money's worth just based on the experience of being in the building. And you're watching a team that's winning football games. The culture there is completely different than it is with the Jets. Just the way that they kind of handle the fans, and I understand these aren't the same things, right? But at the same time, what lessons can True North derive from down the street at the Blue Bombers that they could also implement themselves, and take some of those lessons and make the game experience at Canada Life Center better for fans. So yeah, I mean, some disagree on this, whatever, but I think the problem is there's too many that do agree in the sense that they aren't opening their wallet to pay for tickets right now. And the fact that there's thousands of tickets still available for an opening night matchup against the New York Rangers kind of speaks volume. And I understand we're coming out of a pandemic and all that. And yes, the Bombers don't sell out every game, but they're also getting close to 30,000 fans every game. And those 30,000 fans are coming in willingly spending their money and spending a lot of money on concessions and merch and all that kind of stuff. I think that it's because the Blue Bombers know the market that they're in. And I'm not totally sure at times that True North understands fully the market that they're in. I'm not saying that they don't understand it at all, because I think they do. But again, when you're asking your select season ticket holders, and let's call a spade here, you can say a synonym for select in this case is rich, to invest in the team. And when you're asking your suite owners to invest in the team, which again, if you own a suite, you probably got a lot of money. Again, who are you channeling your efforts to there? I mean, that just seems to me that you're just asking your rich friends to go out and kind of spread the word. And it's like, well, why aren't you spreading the word to the fans, the middle class folks, the regular fan, the fans that are mostly at the game, and getting them more involved in whatever, making them feel welcome, making them whatever it is, to make this team more appealing to people when they're looking at their budgets or whatever it is. And they're using their discretionary funds to spend it on hockey games, because at the end of the day, I mean, that's what needs to be done. I don't think the team's in dire straits yet, and it's going to be moving or anything like that. But I think the pandemic has opened the eyes of this team. But they also need to realize that they need to be the ones now attracting. It always used to be, you come because it's the Jets, and you should come because the Jets are back in town. Well, it's been 11 years now. Hasn't been a whole lot of success on the ice. The Jets have been to the Western Final once, excuse me, and that's been it. So, what are you going to do to get these fans more involved in it, kind of combat the apathy that kind of set in after last season for a lot of people? I just think there was a bit of a miss this summer of both what Kevin Cheveldayoff was able to do and that sort of thing, and just some sort of marketing campaign to get really people kind of back on board, or at least start to kind of cultivate a different type of relationship with your ticket base, the people that you need to spend money to come to the games. And I just think that's been missing so far. And I don't know. I do agree. I mean, the guy in chat here saying, winning does fix everything. I agree. But you also have to, when it's not going well, right? You also have to be able to still attract people to come to the games, because this is let's say the Jets went, if the Jets won 2 Stanley Cups in the next 4 years, right? Okay, perfect. The Jets have 2 banners now. But you look at all these teams that do this, very few of them, go unscathed and completely bypass the fact that you're going to have to rebuild at some point. You look at it in Chicago or whatever, right? I mean, you're a good team for a while, and then eventually it catches up to you because you spend draft picks to try and get better, try and win Stanley Cups. It's just the nature of the beast, right? It's hard to keep a team so successful for a long time. And so there's going to be times where it is a little thin, right? And the Jets are in one of those right now, partly of their own fault and partly just because that's the way it is at times in hockey. But you need people to still come to the games. You still need people spending their money. Inflation has hit things hard. The pandemic, hit the Jets and Canadian teams probably harder than any other teams just because of the public health orders, not being allowed into the rinks, closed games, all that kind of stuff that you didn't necessarily see in the U.S. So in this market, you need to be creative. You need to find ways to attract people, and I just don't think the Jets are there yet.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of good points, Scott. Just to jump in here, just add to what you're saying. I think everyone agrees that the Jets winning games, making the playoffs, going on long playoff runs, that's what's going to sell tickets, right? But I think there's also where is this team heading? What direction is this team heading that people don't really know about? Like you mentioned, like we don't go. I mean, once in a while we go to games as fans. Us probably more so than you, Scotty, because you're usually on a deadline. But like we go usually in the press box or we watch at home and we do the post game show and everything like that. But we interact with a lot of fans, in person, both in person and social media, and a lot of people, I think, don't really know where this team is going. Nobody really expected the Jets to run it back. At the very least, we thought one of Blake Wheeler or Pierre-Luc Dubois was going to be traded. I mean, 4 months ago, we thought it might be Scheifele. We thought maybe 1 or 2 defensemen, like either a veteran or a Logan Stanley, might be moved. I'm not campaigning. I'm just saying there is a logjam. But I think it comes back to, in addition to winning, and I agree with you about the in-day game experience. We've been going to all the games for 11 years. And I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said a lot. The in-game experience, at Jets games has become stale. They need to add to it. They need to make it more fun. Dave has said this many times before. The in-game experience, you could argue, at Moose games is more exciting. The contests that they run during games, the atmosphere, the energy. Like oftentimes it's just nervous energy at Jets games, especially in a season in which they were losing more games than they were winning. But it goes back to, and Drew talked about this quite a bit last year and in the offseason. Like, where are you going? Like, I think a lot of Jets fans look at this team and they say, is Scheifele going to be around in 2 years? Is Hellebuck going to be around in 2 years?
Yeah.
Is Dubois going to be around in 2 years? So when you're talking about some of your best players not being around in 2 years, Connor Hellebuck obviously, is the biggest concern, I think, because he's, one of the best goalies in the league. But when you're talking about Scheifele and Dubois, you're talking about, top 20 centers, in the NHL. So I think a lot of Jets fans just don't know where this team is going. And I think that is one of the reasons why people aren't buying. Fans like, what did the Jets do this offseason to get them excited to buy tickets? Hiring Rick Bowness? Like, I don't think that excites a lot of Jets fans.
It's a savvy hockey market. Sorry, I don't want to wrap it up on this one. We have something more important to get to momentarily. It's a savvy hockey market, and I don't think True North, in their dealings with the hockey market or their dealings with the fan base, treat the fan base with the amount of respect that's necessary, as in, articulate a vision, articulate a plan, and people will be able to understand it, as opposed to the radio silence and the lack of a clear direction. I think if they were to do that, that would go a long way in at least allowing people to know what the vision is for the next 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, and so on. And I think that is just part of their dealings with the fan base. I think could be improved drastically by just treating the fan base as the savvy fans they are in this market. Now on to something a little bit more important before we let you go, Scott. We have to deal with this because this is a serious issue that we are facing. I think I got it up on the screen. Let's see if it works properly here. Hang on a second. Let me just change things around here. I hope this works. We have to talk about Kenny's two-tone head. I don't know if you guys have seen it on the Sportsnet video from last night with the hit that him and Scott did, the hit that him and Sean did. We need to discuss the two tones that are being faced here by Kenny Weeb's head, and we understand that Kenny spent the entire summer on the golf course. The Manitoba Golf Tour was in full force. I didn't get an invite, not that I'm upset about that at all. Scotty, I know you were out there with him a few times, but dear God, look at the two different tones that are being reflected on this head during
it's a real juxtaposition
television hit. What's that?
I think I said it's a real juxtaposition with Weber's two-tone, bald, sleek look, and then you have Sean Reynolds, who just has absolutely perfect hair.
Yeah, Sean's hair is
Rennie
great.
is look at that. Look at the sharpness of Rennie. The beard is perfectly cut. The angles are ideal. The hair is even at a bouffant that isn't as it's in mid-season form. Meanwhile, you got do they not invest in some makeup here? What's going on? A little bit of self-tanner, Kenny.
I think the problem with Kenny's hair is that he's kind of starting to turn into a bit of a gray beard on top there. But he only has so much hair on his head that actually turns gray. And so you get this kind of, I don't know, maybe he can make it work. I mean, Kenny's a good looking guy. I like maybe let's see. Somebody's got to make it work. I mean, maybe it'll be Kenny. He doesn't wear a hat any other time than on a golf course. Sometimes not even there. I don't know how he doesn't just get his head burnt to a crisp every time he golfs without a hat. I don't get it. But yeah,
he just needs a little stubble, Scotty. That's all he needs. He just needs to fill that in a little bit. I don't think
I've ever seen Kenny with. I spent a night in a room with. That sounds bad, but we shared a hotel room one night. Just on the road, there was a bit of a mix-up in our travel plans. One of our travel plans, anyways. I mean, I don't think he even allows the stubble on his face to grow in. It just kind of shaves it, whenever he starts seeing it. I don't think I've ever seen Kenny with any sort of facial hair. Even on a road trip where he kind of wakes up, now he's always just shaving it off. So, and his head at the same time. I'm not bald, so I don't know what that's like to just kind of, you instead of stopping.
Yeah, Drew, jump in here.
You might as well tell us, Drew. Like, I mean, you don't shave, obviously, or you don't use a razor to do it. I'm assuming,
right?
But I mean, I've never felt the experience of, instead of stopping where you normally would, kind of just keep on going. Right?
The old Bic job.
You just got to keep going. But
it's an interesting
I just couldn't get over it.
He's just like, it's quick too, right? Like he's just like, he's going at it pretty good here, and then, it's tremendous.
I feel like Drew needs to have like the old Howie Meeker telestrator. Like I
honestly, I was trying to get one, Ezzy. I'm trying to get a laser pointer that would work.
How you do it? Like just show people how you shave the head and all that. I don't know. But anyways, the two-tone thing is funny. I
had to do it. I was watching the video last night, and they were giving their usual good analysis, and I just the only thing I could focus on was Kenny's two tones, and Kenny's water bottles here.
Kenny's
maybe
there's
going to be
some
a new
this year, Drew. He's got his Kenny's 40 rounds of golf in.
He more than makes up for it with his attire. So Kenny's a well-dressed man, almost always. So yeah.
$1,000 suits, right, Scotty?
Yeah, anytime, guys. This last segment is my favorite. So yeah, I rather we don't need to talk about hockey. Let's just talk about people's half bald heads and shaving them and stuff. That's way more fun. So
way more fun. Scotty, thank you. Have a great Saturday, buddy.
Yeah, you too, guys.
Cheers,
appreciate
Scott.
it. Thanks. Yeah.
Final break. We'll come back. More of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Kenny, we love you. You know that, buddy.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, that was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rollies and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rollies Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rollies, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollies.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
"I sure do."
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal. Starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
We're back. One final segment Saturday morning. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I think Dave M is done with me and with Ezzy potentially for the rest of the weekend. I'm sensing a
no. We're cool.
coming out
it's
of Dave
you.
M.
There's a beef between you and Dave. We're good. Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying that the show has been it's been an unmitigated disaster, Drew, is what I'm saying.
But it's been an entertaining unmitigated disaster. Doesn't that count for something?
Well, let's just say I'm looking forward to you not being on the show next week so I can run this show how I want to run the show. It's going to be not a Minuk Moose minute. It is going to be a Minuk Moose segment. And by that, I mean 2
we're stripping Drew of the H. We're taking the H off of his
That's true.
His jersey.
The H is going to be put right here, right above my Winnipeg shirt. I'm going to be wearing an H, although I won't wear the same shirt.
I thought maybe we would both wear A's. I didn't realize that you had.
Well, you're not the host, though, Ezzy.
I thought
you're the analyst.
Like kings of the round table.
Ezzy, you're the analyst. You're a great analyst, but you're an analyst. You don't get the host. You're not wearing the host.
We still love you, though, Mr. Ginsburg. We still
now,
love you nonetheless.
Drew, we haven't. Yes. I mean, again, we're only 7 minutes left to go in this show or thereabouts, and we haven't even talked about the potential play-by-play news, which I know folks are clamoring for us to talk about because
Dan Robertson.
Well, we don't know that yet.
Well, it's
because there are so many
confirmed.
TV openings. There are so
does
many TV
does
openings.
Any other team right now not have a TV play-by-play guy?
It's hard to believe. Well, I'll tell you what. The Canucks still don't know. The Canucks don't have a radio home. There's a lot of talk the Canucks aren't going to actually broadcast their games on radio this year. They might strictly just stream the audio, is my understanding, through their website. They don't have a radio home for this coming season, and that's apparently by design. With I think an official announcement set to come out of Vancouver still. So I mean, you can see that there's a
that's unfortunate. You got to have your games on radio. Ask the Jays.
Well, I mean, I think it's certainly a bold move. That's cutting out whatever segment of the audience still exists that doesn't stream or doesn't have the capability of streaming. But that's where the Canucks seem to be heading, is the scuttlebutt on the street. And yes, as for a new play-by-play broadcaster for the Jets, no official announcement, but all indications are that it's going to be Dan Robertson.
He's excellent. If it is Dan,
that's a good one.
He is very good. I mean, I think we had him on the show once or twice when we were on TSN 1290. I mean, so if it is Dan, I think we're getting a world-class play-by-play broadcaster. You're never going to replace Dennis. I mean, there's no point comparing the two. But if it is Dan, I mean, fans are going to love him.
Yes. I mean, I would expect an announcement to that effect. You'd think before training camp starts, you think that Dan would want to be here in Winnipeg. I mean, he made the announcement on his radio show in Montreal earlier this week, as we all saw. So you would think it's only a matter of time until he makes that. It's an official announcement from True North or the Jets or TSN or whomever it officially will be from.
Well, I mean, and I think it's important. I mean, not necessarily for the play-by-play, but TSN has no presence, right? Like I saw Freddie, the cameraman, who of course is TSN's cameraman, but he's just shooting it for the
Freddie Mizlachuk.
shooting it for folks back in Toronto. So I mean, it's kind of weird that TSN doesn't have a presence. I mean, I saw Sarah Lesky yesterday, but she's no longer with TSN. She's now with the Jets. So
Freddie almost hit me once in the Bell MTS Iceplex parking lot.
Yeah, I paid him to do that, and I'm really disappointed I didn't get my money's worth.
He was with Sarah. Obviously, he was joking. He wasn't trying to hit me.
But you got to be careful. Sometimes the TV guys, if you're in their shot, they get a little upset. But I will say,
you remember that you remember that I had a little beef the first year of the Jets back in 2011 because back then we used to go and get audio for the post-game shows on TSN 1290.
Yeah,
but there was a little bit of an issue, and Sarah and I had to smooth it over a little bit because Freddie didn't like how close I got to him.
Yeah, you're in Freddie's defense, a lot of people don't like how close you get to them. So there is that element, but
especially with those smells that are emanating from my.
I wasn't going to leave that part out, but since you
could have left that unsaid, Ginsburg. We knew what everyone meant.
But anyways, look, I think it's one positive is that and I actually was talking to Dennis, got a nice birthday congrats from Dennis.
Hey,
but
so Dennis knows when it's your birthday. We're going full circle here. Dennis is a birthday tracker.
I'm not saying. Well, I'm not going to say how I know that Dennis is a birthday. I'm not saying he's a tracker. I'm just saying that Dennis wished me a happy birthday. He knew it was my birthday. Wished me a happy birthday.
I didn't get a happy birthday from Dennis, and it was my 40th.
Well, I'm just saying you don't have the relationship that I have.
You got a cease and desist order from Dennis.
Yeah, exactly. My point is that this market deserved Dennis because Dennis was fantastic, and I think this market deserves an excellent play-by-play voice. And if it is Dan Robertson, I have a link yesterday or maybe today also in the papers. Some of his greatest hits that the folks at TSN 690 put together. So if you want to give that a listen to, it's definitely worth checking out. If you have,
by the way, guys, Dan Robertson did say one of the conditions of him becoming the new play-by-play voice for the Jets and TSN was that he refuses to do anything with a legal curve. So I think we should just know that right off the bat. Like he basically said, do not contact me. Don't contact my people. I'm here, but
my people won't contact you.
It's not like a legal curve.
Yes. So anyways,
that's just prudent on his part. Let's be perfectly honest.
Yeah, he's preemptively getting out in front of what everybody else does eventually. So it's disassociation from a legal curve. Yeah. We've been trying it for years. It still doesn't work. But the point is, good for Winnipeg that they'll get, in theory, if it ends up being Dan. We don't know who Sarah's replacement, of course, is going to be yet. And I suspect that's perhaps what's maybe the holdup right now because it is. I did say to Freddie yesterday, I'm like, what's going on here with TSN? Why do you not have anybody yet? But we'll see what happens.
Did Freddie wish you a happy birthday, Dave?
He did not. He did not. No, that is true. B. Henderson's asking who is D. Robertson. Dan Robertson is the English radio voice of the Montreal Canadiens, and he's been doing it. I think he's done 8 years of that for the Habs. So if you, like I said, if you go to illegalcurve.com in the morning papers, check I think it's note 3. There were a lot of notes in the papers today. There's a lot of interesting tidbits to talk about. Again, we didn't really get into the rookie game because none of us really watched it, let's be honest. Yeah. But the truth is that Brad Lambert scored his first goal in a Jets uniform. 2021 fifth rounder Dmitry Rashevsky heading over to the KHL. He's got 2 goals in his 2 straight games. He's got 4 goals, 1 assist in 7 games. Scored a beauty. I put it on my Twitter. And so keeping aware of what's going on with the prospects, lots to like, lots to look forward to.
And as a rule here on the show, when Dave is starting to give KHL scoring updates, that's time to end this broadcast. So we're going to say a big thank you to all the sponsors of Illegal Curve who make the post-game show. That's coming up less than a month from now. The Saturday show, that's right now. The website, that's always around.
I did eat at the keg. Hold on, Drew. I did eat at the keg last night.
And there you go. Dave did eat at the keg last night, the newest sponsor.
Did you have the French onion soup?
I did not.
It's my favorite.
Salmon.
I do enjoy a good French onion soup.
Pacific or Atlantic?
The pistachio salmon.
Pistachio crusted salmon.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyways, our friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, they always deserve a great shout out. Rachel Feinstein. I had the pleasure of seeing Rachel yesterday.
I think it's Feinstein, Drew.
It's Feinstein. I heard her pronounce it. It's Feinstein. I would think she knows how to pronounce her own last name, Ezzy, but appreciate it nonetheless. Be sure to check her out. 2 shows tonight at Rumors. Get your tickets, rumorscomedyclub.com. Our friends at Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group, Realty, Bethway, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, Seagram's. In case you're thirsty, Rolly's Transfer, Grid Park, and our newest sponsor, as mentioned, our friends at The Keg. A big thank you to all these businesses. Support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. In case you haven't already done so, smash the like button. comment on the YouTube page, comment on the podcast edition. Be sure to tell all your friends, tell all your family. The best place to be every Saturday morning and after each and every Winnipeg Jets game is right back here on our Illegal Curve YouTube channel. Big thank you to Scotty Billeck for joining us for a lengthy conversation. Big thank you to all of you in the chat for joining us. So great to see so many new faces, so many familiar faces that join us each and every Saturday and after each and every Winnipeg Jets game. Dave Minuk is in the top right. The bottom middle is populated by His Royal Highness King Ezra II.
God save
Winnipeg.
the curve, Drew.
Yeah, whatever the hell you just said. I'm your host, Drew Mindell. Until next Saturday, we say thanks for watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.